D'Arcangelo. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you, Cannabis. I really appreciate this opportunity, Voxy Pop, and of course, Rasheen Delaney, who asked me to join this event and be one of the keynote speakers. It's kind of weird for me to be doing this virtually, although I've done a lot of virtual meetings and events this year, thanks to 2020 and COVID. But it's hard because from a speaker standpoint, when you're talking to people, I always gauge the audience, right? And I look to see how I'm doing when I'm speaking based on the interactions I'm seeing with the audience, their facial expressions, et cetera, if they're leaning in. And this is so hard to do. So bear with me today. And later on, when we get through some of this discussion points, I will have a Q&A session. So feel free to ask questions as I'm talking. I love to get questions. I love to provide feedback. I really like for people to understand what I'm thinking and what's important to me or what's not, for that matter. So my topic today is basically relevant to the fact that about 4.5 years ago, I got into the cannabis space. I am a biotech pharmaceutical device executive. I've been in the global industries for now 22 years. This coming May will be my 23rd anniversary. I started very, very young in my career, and I've been fortunate, whether or not you like pharmaceuticals or biotech, I have to tell you, I've been fortunate that I've been able to gather a lot of experience. I did outsourcing contracts with investigator sites and the doctor sites. I worked on clinical trial protocols throughout my career, operationalized studies, and I've worked on some really, really amazing indications. And I'm proud to say that I have a tremendous amount of FDA approved drugs under my belt, working in the industry as long as I have been. So let's go back to about 4.5 years ago when I made this transition over. And it wasn't something that I anticipated, actually. It was kind of an interesting thing that came across my plate, so to speak. In 2015, my father died from stage 4 liver, lung, and stomach cancers at the age of 62. We reside in Pennsylvania. At that time, Pennsylvania did not have a medical cannabis or CBD component. Patients were, just using pharmaceutical products at that time. And I say that because as I talk to you about this process on how I got into this industry and what I've done since, I kind of just want you to have that background and understanding, so I'm not skipping around. So basically what happened was my father passed in August, he was diagnosed in August of 2015, and he passed away October 13th of 2015. In that short period of time when I was caring for him and advocating for him, I realized that a lot of patients don't have people like myself in their family where they have the experience to be able to navigate clinical trials, talk to doctors, figure out insurance things, all the things that it takes when a patient's sick. I realized that there weren't a lot of people that had this. And so that's when I decided to start the nonprofit, which is called Affinity Patient Advocacy. And basically what we do, and it's really not basic, but what we started to do in the beginning was we ended up advocating for traditional patients. Our original patients that we sought to treat and help at no cost were cancer patients. I'm sure you can understand why cancer patients were obviously a target for us. I watched my dad suffer for 22 years, but obviously the latter part of his life was the worst. So let's fast forward. Basically, I ended up getting a request to speak at a local Relay for Life. And I was very honored by this because they asked me to come and speak from my heart, from taking care of my dad. Being in the pharmaceutical industry for as long as I have been, I'm used to speaking at conferences all the time. And it's usually about subject matter things. It's never personal. It's never about feelings from the heart. It's based on facts. That's typically what industry conferences are. So you can imagine, I've been this professional corporate speaker for all these years. Now I'm going to be speaking in front of all these people about one of the most difficult times of my life. And while I was going through all of that, I really never thought about the end result. And the end result was he was going to pass away. I was just doing my job. I was advocating for him. I was ensuring that the doctors, he had many doctors because he had so many different types of cancers. And he also had specialists that worked alongside the oncologist and then even back to his general practitioner. So anyway, I'm not trying to get off track, but I'm just explaining, the severity of this. And I'm sure as many of you listening today, you've seen people that whether you're friends or loved ones or colleagues, go through these types of situations. So I'm sure you can identify with, it was a very taxing and hard time in my life. So here, I need to write the speech and talk about all these things that occurred. And again, it was the first time I ever really spoke about it in public and to a forum of people. And I was just trying to figure out what was the best way to talk about this because I'm a clinical person. I write clinical trial protocols, I operationalize studies. You'll hear me talk about, if you hear any of my interviews or other speaking engagements, you hear me talk, and sometimes a very scientific terminology. So I was trying to figure out the best way to convey my thoughts and some of the technicalities of my dad's situation. And so I just basically decided it was just time to talk, just like I'm doing today. And so I did. And fortunately for me, as a result of that, my speech caught the eye of a grower out on the West Coast. And they contacted me because I have a clinical research organization called Affinity Biopartners, which was the first company in the Affinity family. And my name, DiArcangelo, isn't a name that is like a Smith or Jones. So it's probably the same person who is the CEO of Affinity Patient Advocacy is the same person for Affinity Bio. And so they were able to put those two things together, and they reached out to me and asked me to potentially help them develop their grow into a FDA regulated grow facility. So for those of you that don't work in this industry, there's a lot of regulations behind this and certifications you have to acquire. And one of the things is good manufacturing process, GMP. That's one of the requirements of the FDA when you're making clinical trial product. So even though this is a plant, it's considered clinical trial product in the eyes of the FDA. And so when they reached out to me and asked me if this was something I'd be interested in, I had been seeing some of this research that was coming across my radar because I've been in research for so long and multiple indications, as I alluded to prior. I pretty much try to pay attention to what's going on out there in the space of research. So I've been seeing a lot of different things going on. A lot of the studies were ex-US studies, and there were some private institution studies as well. And I noticed that there was valuable evidence that supports CBD and cannabis and derivatives thereafter, terpenes, etc., for medicinal value. So remember, I was a traditional biotech pharmaceutical person, right? So I only know manufactured products, and I did work on some nutraceuticals prior to this, but not a robust amount of those. So when this company asked me if I would be interested in this, and I'd already been looking at some of the research prior to the call, so I was ready. And I know what I know as it relates to clinical research in the traditional space. I then decided that it was time for me to make a bold leap. And my leap was into the cannabis space. And I got to tell you, it was not met all the time with hugs and love, because I come from a highly regulated side, right? The FDA, right? I don't work for the FDA, but everything I do and I have done over the past 20 years or so at that point has been done under the guidance of the FDA or thereby equivalence ex-US because I've been doing ex-US studies for years. So some people didn't want me in the industry because I kept preaching from day one, there has to be more research. There has to be more research. If we want this to be a medicine and we want this for medicinal value and we want insurance to eventually cover this as a treatment option for patients, we need clinical research. Some people were very happy to have me come in because they understood that I was bringing validity to the industry that was lacking. The work that I do is not anecdotal. There are observational studies I do, sure. Last year, we worked on an observational study with Dr. Donner and Compassion Certification Centers in Pennsylvania, where we used our cannabis and we did an electronic patient reported outcome questionnaire for thousands of patients in the Pennsylvania program where we queried them on their participation in the program and what they liked and didn't like, down to products, down to facility, i.e. dispensary, even to the physicians that prescribe, that allow them to have a card. In Pennsylvania, there's no prescription. In other words, you go to the doctor validates your qualifying condition, everything gets run through the state, you get your card, you go to the dispensary and you meet with a pharmacist. That's how our program works. But anyway, I digress because there's a lot I could talk about this. And it's a lot of the stuff that I learned, guys. Like I didn't know a lot of these things because I came from traditional pharmaceutical and biotech. So what I did know was how to do these things, like how to generate a questionnaire, how to run observational studies, how to design protocols, how to work in regulation areas. I'm used to working in regulations. It's much, much harder though for us to work in the cannabis space to be able to move the product, the clinical trial product around if it has THC in it without a DEA license. So I had to learn very quickly and very efficiently how I could do my research like I normally do in an abnormal situation, an emerging situation, an upcoming industry. In the meantime, as I started working on these research studies and such, I then started getting patients that needed advocacy help. Because again, people were tying the same person together with these companies. So we started advocating for patients for CBD products. A lot of times we get questions about, well, what are products that we would recommend? Because they understand, a lot of people understand that the CEO of Affinity Patient Advocacy is a researcher and works in drug development. We also get patients that come to us that need cards. And in Pennsylvania, because that's where we are, we're headquartered here. We have access to, like I mentioned, Compassion Certification Centers. They're one of our partners. And we work with all of our patients through CCC with Dr. Donner and the physicians and the nursing staff and the whole team at CCC. And we help patients all the time regarding getting their cards or recommending products in that program because I happen to also be a patient. So in the middle of all this, getting into cannabis as a profession, I end up getting diagnosed with 2 autoimmune diseases in 2018. Both of them are pain-backed autoimmunes. So that means I'm in pain a lot of the times, and both cause brain fog. So imagine somebody who has to deal with clinical research and all these things, right? And my advocacy firm, then being diagnosed with these. What was I going to do? How was I going to treat them? And so I, in 2018, started taking CBN, CBG, and CBD in February for the first autoimmune that I had, and it was helping. It was helping me a lot. But then in about August, September-ish of 2018, I realized that again, the pain was coming back. there was an issue. I had my limits checked again to see where I was, and found out much later, a couple months later, that I had another one. So prior to that second diagnosis, I had applied for a card. I had never been a cannabis user prior to that. I even lived in California in San Francisco for 5 years, but I've always been again a biotech person and traditional, and what I know is pharmaceuticals. And so I started using my medical card and taking THC in the evenings. What I like to take is Rick Simpson oil, RSO, in the evening, because it helps me with the anti-inflammatory issues that I have, especially pain. And it helps me with the brain fog too, because it's important. I don't really rest a lot, right? Because I'm doing a lot of things. I need to be able to fire on all cylinders. So for me, that's when I take my THC. And also, one of my autoimmune diseases caused massive weight gain. I have Hashimoto, which is a thyroid one, and I had kept gaining weight, and it was like a lot of weight, and I couldn't get rid of it. It didn't matter what kind of diet, what didn't matter. And I'm pretty active. From an exercise standpoint, I was very athletic, long while ago. So it just was, I didn't know what was going on. So I was able to, I obviously had more energy as I was going through this protocol of treatment, so to speak, unwritten. But I also was able to lose an exorbitant amount of weight. It's been like 85 pounds now that I've lost healthy, just watching my sugar intake and any of the other things that cause inflammation, because we all know that diet in your gut and cortisol, all these things play into, how you feel as a patient, right? So these are all really important things, I think. So anyway, I became a patient and in the program, and was able to see what it was like to be in the program as a patient. So some of those things that were represented in our white paper that we ended up writing about the actual program in Pennsylvania, I got to see some of these things firsthand. And I've got to tell you, even though I've been a traditional, pharma person for so long, and I've seen the benefits of traditional products and such, when I moved over to the cannabis side, although it was bold and not well welcomed by a lot of my traditional colleagues, which now they've kind of turned themselves and are interested in this as the space grows, I was really helped by this plant. And I'm happy to be able to boldly say, and honestly and truthfully say, you know what? This helped me. It continues to help me. And am I saying that we should stop traditional pharmaceutical products and just fully focus on the plant? No, you'll never hear me say that. Are there a lot of side effects in traditional pharmaceutical products? Yes, there are. Do you find a lot of side effects with the plant and cannabis and CBD derivatives from companies that are doing the right things, following the rules? No. Are there drug-drug interactions? Sure there is. That's why the research is so important. That's why I feel like that's one of the things that I bring to this industry is the validity behind the research. I only do projects that I know are going to be run in a proper manner, that are going to be run against the regulations that we have to adhere to. A lot of people think about the FDA coming into the industry and they're fearful or they're upset, but we need them. Whether or not we like it, we need them. They regulate these products and they're interested in learning more. And I, as a person that's been in this industry for a long time, not cannabis, but, the other industry, the traditional side, I'm happy to be able to work with the FDA to help them understand what really is happening in the research space, what we're seeing, and some of the transformational aspects of these patients that we're seeing that we've helped with APA, the nonprofit, and then a lot of the patients that we've helped with the research studies, the people that have participated in them. I mean, it's been an amazing endeavor, and it's not been an easy one. And with what's happened out there, this year with COVID, I've kind of gone back into the traditional side a little bit, meaning that I'm actually working on 3 traditional COVID protocols, and 2 out of the 3 are treatment protocols. But the first sponsor company that has pushed out the first treatment protocol I worked with on and submitted in March, they're actually a nutraceutical CBD biotech company that was looking to help this COVID endeavor so that hopefully we could get back into running research for what we really have our passion for, which is medical cannabis, CBD, and nutraceuticals. So we've been in the trenches, every day working on this, trying to help. That's really the premise of why I'm in this industry, is to help people, but also make a difference and to do things fact-based, not knee-jerk, not anecdotally, not, oh, well, so-and-so told me this or that, and so I'm doing this. No, we're here, and I'm here specifically to bring validity to this industry. And, as a result of all the stuff that I've been doing in the research and some of the things that we have planned already for next year, I decided to launch my own personal brand. And I don't know if I would have done that if I had stayed in just traditional biotech or pharmaceuticals, because I'm just like any other researcher, right? However, I do have the nonprofit work I do, so I don't know if I'm just like any other researcher. I don't know. But anyway, um, I launched my brand. I am Christina D'Arcangelo of July this year. And the intention is to talk about some of the things we talked about or we're talking about today. The things that I've done in the cannabis industry and CBD industry, the things that I plan to do in the coming years. Even my son, he has ADHD. And so, he has a very tight treatment protocol for himself. And I'm happy to say that one of the companies that I actually work for, we will be doing an ADHD study in the next year, specifically to help kids with ADHD. These are all, as you can tell, all these things are all passion things for me, really, truly. They're all unmet medical needs. These are all indications where people are sick and there's nothing a lot out there to help them. Patients that have PTS that fought for our country that now have been left to live in the compounds of the United States as it is today. And especially with COVID, imagine what the mental health ratio looks at right now. Imagine what we can do if we have the opportunity to run this research the right way and help these patients from a telemed standpoint to actually see if they're sleeping, to see what their cortisol levels are. What about the endocannabinoid DNA? All these awesome things that we have planned. But I sidetracked again from my thought process, which was, I had launched my personal brand in July. And what I hope to do with that is to educate people with respect to medical cannabis and CBD, health benefits, et cetera, whole life wellness, but also to share my story as a person. I grew up a blue collar kid. My dad was a Teamster, a Pennsylvania Turnpike guy. Before that, he was a steelworker, president of the Steelworkers Union. I don't know how much blue collar I could get from that, and I feel like there's a lot of things that I can share about me. I'm self-made. I have had a lot of struggles, I'm a single mom too now, which is different from when I had Christian initially, so there's a lot of things that I want to be able to help patients with, but I used cannabis and CBD as my tipping off point, I feel, as a person, but also as a professional. And that's really how I kind of got into all of this. I know I've just been talking and talking and talking, but it's just, I just feel very blessed to have the opportunities to do what I've done thus far and to see the results that I'm seeing based on my work and all the people I work with, the brilliant people, the formulators, the scientists, the physicians, all these great people that all have the same intended purpose in mind, and that's helping sick patients. So I'm going to go and look and see if I have any questions yet for today. And I don't have any questions yet. Is if anyone would like to ask me any questions regarding any of these things that I've said, if you want to ask specific questions regarding research or what exactly it is I'm doing. I know that I've talked very high level about a lot of these various things, but it's only because of confidentiality reasons. I can't really get into too many specifics because, you know, I have obligations to my clients and then also my employer, Spectral Analytics. Okay, we just got a political question. Yes, so it's you know, I got to tell you, as I shift in my seat, I would have thought we would have been switched over under the last presidential election, honestly. You know, as I'm sure you guys can imagine out there, you know, growing up blue collar and having a dad that was very, very high up in the unions, you can imagine he was politically involved, right? I grew up um, running polls with my dad, and you know, not to get political, but you know, I'm a registered Democrat, you know, and it makes sense, right? That's how I I grew up, and I have a lot of the same values. So I was very surprised that the last presidential term, we did not see a Schedule 1 disappear as it relates for research purposes. I know that that seems to be a lot of the presidential candidates' platforms, most of them anyway. So I'm hoping with where we are currently with the new president-elect, they obviously have a positioning that's pro-cannabis. And we saw what happened on election day with respect to the states, right? The states are coming in strong and hard, and they're telling the politicians that they want to change. And the change is allowing us to be able to, in my opinion, do research without handcuffs, because right now I'm handcuffed. I can't move my study drug from Pennsylvania to Alabama effectively. So it slows down our progress. So I'm hoping, I really, really am hoping that presidential-elect Biden actually does something for the good of research from us, you know, moving out of a Schedule 1 platform. All right, so I have another question here about ADHD. Will the studies be for children? Yes, the first studies are going to be a pediatric study, just so you know that. And we will eventually move into adult population because a lot of as adults, as we know, you know, most people know have ADHD. I mean, I'm undiagnosed ADHD, but I'm pretty sure I have it. I'm not surprised my son has ADHD based on, you know, who his mom is. But no, in all sincerity, we're going to work with children first. With respect to how we solicit patients for our clinical trials. So we have the ability to use our technology sister company to do AI so that we can actually find those patients that way. But the other way that we do it is we actually advertise. We advertise through my company, Affinity Bio Partners, whether it's their website or Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. But then also we will use the nonprofit Affinity Patient Advocacy. That's one of the beauties of having a sister firm as a nonprofit, because we have patients that are in our care through the nonprofit that may want to participate in a clinical study. There was a question that was asked about someone asking me how they want to get into the cannabis industry. If they're not in the cannabis industry now and they want to get into the cannabis industry. I think the best way to answer that without knowing what your skill set is to really embrace the skill sets that you have already in existence. So to make a parallel to that, I was a clinical research person before I got into this industry. So I leveraged all of my know-how as it relates to clinical research. I brought that forward. Now, it's important for you to realize that not always everything that you have over there is going to be effective for this industry, right? Because there's certain things that are non-applicable. So you have to be mindful and you have to pay attention to what the industry trends are. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I'm reading some of these questions. So I apologize if I'm like leaning in here. Okay, so my role model for the industry, oh my gosh, it's Dr. Meshulam, of course. You know, I mean, holy cow, I refer to him as the, not to be religious when I say this, or culturally undiverse because I am Italian, but I refer to him as the godfather of cannabis. I mean, he has done so much in our industry in a time when it wasn't looked upon fondly, right? It was way before I even thought about getting into this industry. He's paved the way in a tremendous fashion with teaching and developing and formulating. He is definitely my role model. And actually, in 2019, I was in Barcelona, and that was when I had met some of the staff from Cannabis, including Roisin, and which it was amazing. We were at the World CBD Awards, and I was asked to present Dr. Meshulam with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Obviously, he wasn't in Barcelona, and we did it, you know, in a televised fashion, and he had a person there to accept the award on his behalf. But I got to tell you, it was the most amazing experience. You know, it's just, and I've worked with some leading researchers. You can imagine the people that I've worked with throughout my career in traditional pharma. So it's just amazing to see someone like Dr. Meshulam. So he definitely is my favorite person. Oh, thank you so much. So someone just said they said I was doing an amazing talk and that I was inspirational. Thank you. I this is where it makes it so hard not seeing the audience, because you know, you guys can tell that I'm a visual person and I like to connect with people. And when I do this way, it's very hard. You know, I have a fountain in my office in the background and windows, and my doodle's locked up because I was afraid he would bark. So this is, you know, it's really hard to do it this way. So I'm so grateful for that compliment. Thank you so much. All right. I think that we have answered all the questions um, that we've received. If there's any other questions, if you wouldn't mind sending them through within like the next minute or so, that would be great. Otherwise, we could wrap up so that way you guys can take a little break before the next speaker comes on. I'm hearing that it's someone who is a specialist in endocannabinoid and DNA, which is always an exciting topic to learn about, because if you don't understand your DNA, especially if you don't understand the endocannabinoid system and endocannabinoid DNA, how can you treat yourself effectively? How do you know whether or not you should be taking CBD, CBG, CBN, CBDE, THCA, THC, unless you understand what's going on with your body? And this is something that, you know, I was kind of alluding to when I was talking about research. This is something that we want to make sure that we really fine tune so that we treat the patient for the disorder, not just throwing things at the patients like it is right now. So as far as 2021, someone already asked me about what's going on with 2021 and what's going on with affinity patient advocacy. I think affinity patient advocacy is going to push out a new arm from a service model standpoint, and that would be a for-profit model arm. And it's not for the patients to buy, just to be clear. So as I'm sure you can imagine, and because somebody already asked me about patient recruitment, we understand patients very well, right? I especially have been in this industry for a long time. We know what type of patients and how to recruit them and such. So affinity patient advocacy is going to open up a sponsor biotech, pharmaceutical, CBD, and medical cannabis arm, wherein we would actually help those companies find the patients they need to find for their studies. So it would be outside of Affinity Bio Partners. It would be affinity patient advocacy actually coming from a patient standpoint. When we come through Affinity Bio Partners, we're coming through as clinical research organization, leveraging APA. So I've decided that this was a good idea for us to start moving forward with this initiative, especially since we've been getting requests to do it. So we might as well just build this out and what it looks like. So I'm going to be adding a new board member to APA that I will be announcing soon that's going to help me build this out. She has a very strong finance background and has been in the industry 27 years and has worked on devices and all kinds of great things. And an advocate, a true advocate at heart. So she and I are going to be working on that. So look for a press release to come out. As far as Affinity Bio Partners is concerned, we're getting ready to start a large clinical study here in Pennsylvania within a Pennsylvania medical program product with CCC and Dr. Donor. That study I'm really excited to work on because it's going to be a head-to-head study. So it'll be against a traditional pharmaceutical product, which is first of its kind. No one has done a head-to-head study in anything, not even the topical. So I'm really, really excited about that. And then spectral analytics, we're doing a lot of awesome things. We're getting ready to launch a telemed platform to work directly with patients, physicians, as well as central lab, DNA, all kinds of really, really cool things. So see that to come out in Q1 of 2021. We're building out all the different components right now and finalizing our partners. And then I am Christina DiArcangelo. I'm going to start writing my book. I've decided, one of the things I wanted to do was write a book. And so you'll see more blogs coming out through my website as part of, chapter pieces in my book. But I'm really looking to start writing my book and sharing my story because there's lots of things I want to share, especially, with all this COVID stuff and what we've gone through. But, there's a lot of things I want to talk about. For example, I'm a victim of trauma and I want to share some of these things with people. So that's what 2021 looks like for now on the books. I try to only project for Q1 because if I project for the whole year, it becomes overwhelming. And I got to stop doing that, I've been told. So I have no other questions. I thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much. And I hope you learned something. And if you need to get a hold of me, the best way is LinkedIn, Christina DiArcangelo. Please feel free. And thank you to Cannabis and everyone that showed up today. And thank you for spending your time with me.